Okay, class, this video is going to cover chapters 10 through 14. We're going to give this another try. The first 3 or 4 versions of this, for some reason, would not work. So I just want to highlight some of the key parts of chapters 10 through 14. Chapter 10 is going to deal with will contests and what you need to focus on. I know I already talked about the formalities turning into defenses and contests, and they do. Having the proper signatures, having it notarized, being of age. But look at the other common contests: insane delusions, undue influence, duress, fraud, mistake. A couple of things. On insane delusion, make sure that you recognize that insane delusion is a very narrow contest. We allow for a lot of crazy and eccentric ideas to surface, but an insane delusion would be something probably that defines it best as something that the party accepts in spite of evidence to the contrary that they should accept, and that's the key, that they should accept. One of the examples the book gives is somebody who hires a private detective, and that detective presents them evidence that they proceed to reject as well. So you can't reject something that you have created, that you have asked for, that goes beyond what is and ends up being sane for the purposes of estate planning. The other thing I want to point out here is duress versus undue influence. The elements you can read through, but I want to make this distinction. In order for there to be undue influence, there has to be a relationship of import, one of significance. It doesn't have to be blood relative, but it has to be somebody that would have the ability to use their relationship in order to unduly influence another. So give that some thought as you read through those sections. As you get into chapter 11, it's a fairly short chapter. It deals with other will issues, conditional wills, joint wills, things of that nature. Condition precedent versus condition subsequent. The condition precedent, just to give you an example, would be that a party can only take once they've reached 21 years of age or once they've given birth to their first child. Condition precedent, classically, used to get used a lot with property. If you were given land, that land may have to remain agricultural, or it may have to grow certain types of crops. These are all things that can be required by a will. The only thing you can't do with condition precedent and condition subsequent is something illegal or against public policy. So you can't command somebody to do an illegal act, and you also can't command somebody to do something that we believe is against public policy, such as a condition precedent. I leave to my daughter $50,000 so long as she divorces her husband. That would be against public policy. I could leave money in the event that they get divorced. That would be fine. And it's a fine line, but it's something that has to be governed closely. So, and chapter 12, when you move into estate administration, it's a very technical chapter, and what I want you to focus on in this chapter are two things. One is the steps that the book lays out are very linear, A to Z. But keep in mind that these steps oftentimes overlap, and they oftentimes repeat. That's just the nature of a practice. The other part of chapter 12 that I think is particularly interesting that you need to know are the letters testamentary versus letters of administration. These are the decree from the court that say, executor or personal representative, you get to go to a third party and tell them, this is my decree that I get to govern this property. It is a power of attorney if you want to look at it that way. It's not purely, but just to give you an analogy, it's like a power of attorney. So those are both items that get used. Letters testamentary are used when there's a will. Letters of administration get used when the person dies intestate. When you move into chapters 13 and 14, you get into the second piece of the estate planning pie. So if you think of estate planning as a pie or as a circle, and you divide it up into 4 pieces. The first piece is wills, the second piece is non-probate transfers, the third piece are trusts, and then the fourth piece is the death and disability planning. Non-probate transfers are just that. They don't fall under a will, they don't fall under a trust. The most common example that you might be familiar with is life insurance. Life insurance does not and should not go into a will, and usually does not and usually should not go into a trust. So it's governed outside of those. But it's still part of the estate. It's just not part of the estate that gets regulated by the courts through the estate planning process. So when you're looking at non-probate transfers, people do it because it saves time, it saves money, not only taxes, but attorney's fees. It avoids challenges by other parties. And it also gives the soon-to-be deceased a little more control and flexibility on how they transfer their ultimate property. So when you're looking at chapter 13, it gives you that kind of umbrella idea of what a non-probate transfer is. And then 14 begins to move into more specifics, inter vivos transfers, which are gifts. Look at the elements: donative intent, delivery, and acceptance. But I want to give you a little insight on delivery. Delivery not only means that the person who's receiving the gift receives it, but that the person giving the gift relinquishes all control. What do I mean by that? If I were to get a safety deposit box, and I'm going to give you a gold watch, and I put it in that box, and I lock it, and I go to you, and I have 2 keys, and I give you one of the keys, and say, here's the key, the gold watch is yours. That is not an inter vivos gift, because I still maintain some control over the box. It doesn't become a gift until you go, use the key, take the gold watch out, and now I have no control over it. So keep in mind that delivery is about relinquishment, not just receiving. And that, I think, will help govern what you do under the inter vivos gift when you're reading through inter vivos gifts. Chapter 14 also deals with future interests and powers of appointment, and read both those sections carefully. They are important. But to give you a little insight on power of appointment, which I think people trip up on sometimes, all power of appointment is, in the end, is the ability of you or someone else to transfer their authority to govern property to another person. If you think of ownership of property as a bundle of sticks, one of those sticks is the ability to enjoy the property. Another one of those sticks is the ability to sell the property. One of those sticks is the ability to give your authority to govern the property to somebody else. And that's what that power of appointment is getting at ultimately. And then power of appointment is not a transfer of property permanently. It is appointing someone to hold those rights for a period of time. So when you're reading that section and you see the part that talks about reversion, R-E-V-E-R-S-I-O-N, reversion means whatever's left over of that authority, or when that authority is relinquished by the party it was given to, maybe by death or by act, it comes back to you. Or it could revert back to another party as you instruct. I've heard from some of you that you're like, gosh, some of these concepts are complicated. They are. It's a tricky area of the law, but I think what you should do is don't overcomplicate. And as we begin to move into the trust section, you're going to start to see a lot of overlap, and I think that overlap will help you kind of reinforce some things that either you may be unsure about or unclear about as a part of the will section. As always, email me if you need anything or call my office, and enjoy the rest of your week.